Okay, welcome everybody to the LUNN talk. Today we am very pleased to introduce Atsuko Ichijo. She's an old acquaintance of mine, and I should not say that old means there is something bad. Old means there is something positive.
Yeah,
Atsuko
historical means something
is
positive.
historical,
Yes.
is always positive. So Atsuko has been working at Kingston University for many years, and more recently she moved to Birkbeck College, Birkbeck University of London. And she's also part of the editorial board of Nations and Nationalism. And most importantly for me, sorry if I say, she's one of the key, again, historic figures of ASEN. ASEN, as you know, was created under say the leadership of Anthony D. Smith at the London School of Economics, and so I think, from my perspective, this is something important because ASEN has been instrumental in keeping nationalism studies alive until today. She's also the co-editor of the book Food and Identities in a Globalizing World, and this is exactly the topic that she'll be talking about today. By chance, it happened that I should mention, as an Italian, flagging my Italian pride, that today the UNESCO inscribed the Italian cooking and its ritual and practices in their own intangible cultural heritage list.
Oh,
So,
congratulations.
no, congratulations. Thank you very much. I will celebrate with some nice meal tonight that I will
Sure.
be cooking. We have Atsuko talking for about 30, 40 minutes. And as usual, I would invite everyone to close the microphone and please also close the camera. So we'll have only Atsuko and the slides. And later, when there will be time for Q&A, you can ask the questions by opening the camera or just putting in the chat. So without any further ado, the floor is for you, Atsuko. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco. First of all, can I just thank you, Marco, for inviting me to do this. I obviously Loughborough, being a LSC product, it's been in terms of nationalist studies. It's been rather sad that nationalism studies have disappeared from the LSE, but Loughborough and Edinburgh are still kind of carrying on what Anthony D. Smith, my supervisor, and the company started. And I'm very, very honored to be invited to this talk to LUNN network. And thank you very much. Thank you also for those of you who who have come to this talk, because it would be really great. I was told by Marco that I'm not supposed to discuss my own research into food and nationalism, but try to kind of give a overview report as to what is happening and where it should be going. And that is what I'm trying to do today. And my hope is that we can have lots of discussion and use this opportunity to generate ideas and something exciting to go on from now. Okay, so let me start with this question. What happened on 1st of July 2022? Does anybody know? Now, because I'm presenting, I'm sharing, I cannot see the chat. So if anybody knows, okay, let me just do this. What happened on the 1st of July 2022 is this. Ukrainian borscht was recognized, was inscribed onto the safeguarding list. And this is where I think you probably were aware of this. Now, the event, it's in a way a bit odd. That's what we found. Ronald Ranta, my long-term, long-running co-writer, we have just done this chapter for the what is called the Routledge Handbook of Food and Heritage Studies or something like that. Sorry, I don't have the full title, but the one we started with this news, and no, our observation is that this is rather odd because neither boast or nor its consumption appear to be directly threatened by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine was invaded. Ukraine is under attack, but both itself or the consumption of it doesn't seem to be under threat. So what we kind of obviously try to link to what we are doing in the chapter is that it seems to be the this particular decision by the UNESCO committee can be seen as a part of the wider phenomenon of promoting and attempting to preserve and protect food or culinary heritage ascribed to a particular nation. So it seems that the Marco has just told us that the Italian culinary heritage or Italian cooking, I had to look into this because UNESCO has interesting way of describing what to be inscribed to the intangible cultural heritage list. If it is elitist, it cannot get on, etc. So going back to this, so it seems that there seems to be this things going on, wider phenomenon going on to link certain food items or drinks to a particular nation. And in this regard, food and nationalism can be seen as a study of food and identity. And this is definitely area which continues to expand. To start with, this Anya von Bremsen's National Dish Around the World in Search of Food, History and the Meaning of Home. This came out towards the end of 2023, and it, because she has this Russian/Ukrainian background, there's both, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine features rather prominently. More recently, same year, Ronald Ranta produced a book on the Peruvian cuisine in the book series which Ronald and I co-edit. And recently, Fabio Parasecoli and his collaborators Agatha Bachos and Mateusz Halawa produced a book called The Pierogi Problem, Cosmopolitan Appetites and Reinvention of Polish Food. For some reason, I was a reviewer of this manuscript, and I thought that's a really interesting one. So in terms of food and identity, there seems to be, interesting works keeps coming up and up, more and more monographs, case studies, journal articles seems to be coming through. However, food and identity it's not exactly what I and my co-author Ronald are interested in. We are interested in food and nationalism. Why we are interested in food and nationalism? Because food is obviously essential for life, and it's both tangible and symbolic, and therefore it is inherently political. And obviously, both Ronald and I kind of describes ourselves as somebody interested in study of nationalism, and because we believe that nationalism, however conceptualized, has permeated almost all spheres of life. So therefore, combining these two should provide us a unique or most very useful perspective to look into the modern life. And this is what these three levels we have, or three dimensions rather, we, Ronald and I, suggested that the food and nationalism allows us to look at the modern society or the society we live in from unofficial bottom-up angle or official or bottom. Sorry, top-down. This should be top-down. Sorry, there's definitely a very, very, very clear typo and the global level. So from our point of view, from this point of view, food and identity as such, it's not just, it doesn't cover the whole thing about, whole thing that is, food and nationalism angle can illuminate. So what are they? One of them is gastro-nationalism. Probably you are very aware that this is an concept popularized by Michaela Di Sorsi in her 2010 article, Gastro-Nationalism, Food Traditions and Authenticity Politics in the European Union. What she says is that it's a form of claims making and project of collective identity. It is responsive to and reflective of the political ramifications of connecting nationalist projects with food culture at local levels. It presumes that attacks, symbolic or otherwise, against the nation's food and practices, assaults on heritage and culture, not just on the food item itself. According to Di Sorsi, gastro-nationalism is a defense mechanism to be developed mainly by the state when symbolic boundaries are represented by food are perceived to be violated or under threat. So this is what Di Sorsi had proposed in 2010 article, and it was a very, it was, I think, groundbreaking. And she proposed this idea of gastro-nationalism as a tool to understand food and politics and in an increasingly globalizing world with a focus on state actors and most like. And this is a very popular concept. And it's been 15 years since since her Sorsi's article appeared. And when I just did a quick search on Google Scholar, it produced nearly 1,500 hits. But what I have seen so far is that no major theoretical work on the concept has been produced. Possible exception with a possible expression of Fabio Parasecoli's gastro-nativism, food identity politics, etc. But this is not really conceptual work as such. But again, I think gastro-nativism is, is an idea to try to grapple with what is going on in terms of food identity politics, and so it is kind of how can I say responding to echoing the Sorsi's concern in terms of proposing gastro-nationalism. Having said that, there have been quite a number of case studies on gastro-nationalism. There's at least two recent examples. Johnson's A Food Nation Without Culinary Heritage, gastro-nationalism in Sweden, um, and Jonathan Lear's monocultural and multicultural gastro-nationalism, national narratives in European food shows, etc. So the gastro-nationalism as such, the concept as such, may not be worked on, but there are many case studies using the idea of gastro-nationalism and try to figure out how food and state and usually state and try to figure out how this food and nation are linked and promoted or otherwise by different power holders. Could be states, could be commercial companies, could be media, could be anything. Another dimension of food and nationalism, if you are interested in food and nationalism, could be anything to do with geographical indications. Again, going back to the sources 2010 article, in this, she looked at the French state's use of the EU's protected geographical indication (PGI) for foie gras, and that has started the focus on GI, how GI is used in terms of not just rural development or how can I say, regeneration of the local communities, etc., but as a way of projecting nations. So maybe very much kind of there's an affinity with the idea of nation branding, as I'll be probably touching later. And obviously, Ronald and I looked at GI cases in a book in both editions. And this is a really fun, interesting article. Cicella Wells' 2013 article, Halloumi/Helm, Global Market, European Union Regulation, and Ethnicized Cultural Property. And this is all about how, it's about the Cypriot government's difficulties in trying to get GI status for halloumi. And it was all started off by a Turkish, the migrants with Turkish background setting up a company in Germany to produce herring, which to be exported across Europe. And that's when Cypriot government became alarmed and wanted to get GI status for halloumi, but they didn't quite manage it. And kind of details, what happened, what are the factors, how the idea of GI, the EU is one of the most advanced forces in terms of setting up GI scheme. Why Cypriot government could not negotiate the system successfully, and this is just so, it's fascinating how this in a way dislocated ethnic or national identities are kind of it's kind of activating different identities, including national ones, across the European Union, just because somebody wanted to sell a piece of cheese across Europe and to the States. And then more recently, Martin Huysmans has looked at exporting protection, EU trade agreements, geographical indications, and gastro-nationalism. He's in Utrecht, and organized a workshop on GIs 2 years ago. And what is happening here is that if you are looking at food and nationalism in reference to GIs, there's a clear, it's kind of links to global intellectual property management, trade agreement, and obviously also the community development. So if you go towards this direction, economists, rural sociologists, development scholars, and lawyers come in, and the discussion becomes quite different from what I, as basically sociologist, I am familiar with. And then comes the intellectual cultural heritage list. Why it is important? Because in 2010, for the first time, culinary heritage was inscribed onto the list. Two elements: gastronomic meal of the French and traditional Mexican cuisine, ancestral, ongoing community culture, and sorry, I cannot pronounce this, Michoacan paradigm. And since then, the intangible cultural heritage list has become kind of a assumed stronger presence. It's already 20, presence in terms of food and national identity. So again, here you have many different case studies. Baha's work is on this keskek. It's fascinating how this idea of keskek has been inscribed as a Turkish tradition onto the list. But that kind of ignited certain kind of almost food fights along that particular regions, Armenia and Azerbaijan, etc. Everyone's involved there. In Singapore, whether the hawker culture should be, should be inscribed, should be promoted or not, became an issue. And recently, Romagnoli has kind of produced a more reflective piece on gastronomic heritage elements at UNESCO. And what these works are suggesting, highlighting, not only these different kind of power dynamics, etc., different constellation of power, configuration of power, but the homogenizing effects on culture and cultural practices in applying for inscription, because this is a UNESCO maintained list. Who is a member of the UNESCO? It's nation states or other member states. So the element, the application has to have a nationality, and this is where the a local particular culture becomes more homogenized or more nationalized or not. There might be some fight against it, etc. Another interesting concept is gastro-diplomacy, coined by Paul Locona in 2012. Gastro-diplomacy, how countries conduct cultural diplomacy through promotion of their cuisine, is an increasingly popular strategy for public diplomacy and nation branding, as a strategy of middle powers trying to create better brand recognition. Numerous middle powers have invested significant capital resources in culinary diplomacy projects to enhance global awareness of their respective cultures as a means to further nation brand status and soft power, etc. This is very popular concept as well. However, I haven't seen any major theoretical or conceptual work on this since 2012. Yes, O'Connor himself has produced a chapter, etc., etc. But there's no major change, theoretical or conceptual work on this. And that leads me to nation branding. When you're looking at the kind of a state of art in terms of food and nationalism, nation branding and food becomes very prominent. It's the application of corporate marketing concepts and techniques to countries in the interest of enhancing their reputation in international relations. And related to, as you are aware, it's related to soft power, tourism, and trade promotion. And when it comes to food, intangible cultural heritage becomes very prominent, and as well as GIs. And what these works on nation branding and food in relation to intangible cultural heritage and geographical indications suggest that highlights the importance of global regulatory frameworks and market forces. So that probably this refers to commercialization of culture. So the idea maybe okay, we are all of us in a capitalist society, I suppose, but so nothing will be probably escape in commercialization. But is that you know, what happens to culture as well? And in terms of nation branding and food, and there's definitely room for expanding to sustainability in general. So the idea of sustainability in terms of production, perhaps of food or agriculture, but also in terms of sustainability of the brand itself. There are another kind of layer or another dimension of how we can study um, our, our society comes in. And obviously, food being food, the works on the relationship between food and banal nationalism or everyday nation food. This Wright and Annie's article was again another hilarious one. It's kind of looks at media discourse which which try to portray the introduction of halal hamburger at the fast food chains in France as a threat to national identity. Um, so that's quite interesting. Another one, Knight and Dominic has looked at food television and how the food television uh, food television works in terms of national identity production and maintenance. This interest. So, if I try to sum up what's the current state of studying eating and drinking nation, definitely it is an expanding area. Lots of works are coming up. There are many interesting concepts: gastro-nationalism, gastro-diplomacy, nation branding, and these interesting concepts are explored in a variety of case studies. However, not many attempts have been made to systematically develop concepts themselves. Although, Ronald and I have been trying to do this, but no, we haven't been. We need to keep up with ourselves. And definitely there is a sustained interest in studying food and identity. Now, going to the future research agenda, the first one I would suggest is the focus on the Heritization of food and its impact on nationalism. In terms of a culinary heritage and globalization, and the indigenization of nations through culinary heritage. And this is obviously most likely carried out in deference to the intangible cultural heritage list or the nation branding in terms of tourism promotion, etc. And GI, geographical indications, as a way of, again, yes, branding and branding the nation and try to sustain that brand, the nation. Obvious heritization can be linked to gastro-nationalism, gastro-diplomacy, and this is where you will be looking at how different actors interact or don't interact. Because heritization is now globally regulated, mainly through UNESCO, the state still carries a lot of weight. International organizations of various sorts, UNESCO to start with, EU as a prime GI promoter, the GI scheme promoter, and local communities and traditions which may or may not want to use these frameworks in order to sustain, develop, protect their traditions, practices, etc., etc. And industries are interested in this because obviously there's a profit motive behind it. So this is a future, the number one, the future direction number one. It is all about how values are defined and promoted in modern society. Number two, it's a bit more complicated and touches on science and society. It's about climate change, food, and national identity. To put it very, it cannot be really simple, but try to be as simple as possible. The question could be, what would happen to a strong link between certain food items and national identity when the urgency of tackling climate change is widely accepted? Okay, still slightly abstract. What I mean. Wet rice cultivation, for instance, is known to produce much greenhouse gases, in particular methane. Okay, so that's one. On the other hand, rice exerts powerful symbolic influence on Japanese identity. This is there was a food rice riot again earlier this year because I mean, despite the decline in consumption of rice, apparently there was a shortage and there was a riot. There was almost riot, and it's seen as a crisis. And it's hypocritical because people not eating rice, but when then there's shortage, they start kind of blaming the government and etc. About not looking after Japanese, what is needed Japanese, the essence of Japaneseness. Anyways, so it is an rice and Japanese identity. It's very strongly linked. However, when the public accepts that wet rice cultivation exacerbates global warming, and there has been some, it's not really, I think, well-known fact yet, but it becomes the fact that the wet rice cultivation produces northern greenhouse gases, and therefore contributing to global heating. Would it affect the linkage between rice and Japanese identity? Does it mean, would they say, okay, in that case, we need to curtail the production of rice in order to deal with global warming or climate crisis? Or would it be the case that this scientific fact would be ignored? Just people just don't pay any attention, or whatever. What will happen? So this is a kind of thing that can be applied to other food items. I was thinking of, say, red red meat consumption or steaks and basically red meat consumption in places like Argentina, Brazil, Australia. Again, we know that branching is very, very problematic in terms of the production of greenhouse gases, as well as kind of food distribution, etc. If people make the connection between the two, that in order to produce this enormous amount of red meat, that has a lot of impact on the environment as well as the level of poverty across the world. What would happen to the people's sense of national identity, or the supposed connection between the food item and national identity? So this is one of my pet project. And thirdly, I think there's another interesting venue, and Jason is. I know that Jason is interested in this food and nationalism in difference to democracy or populism. Ronald, my co-author, has been talking about food and nationalism and populism, and I think this is another way food and nationalism in terms of right-wing politics can be very interesting because, as Ronald's work suggests, Nazi Germany was kind of tried to promote vegetarianism because partly because they wanted to cut down on the reliance on food import, but also by mobilizing this organic discourse about the soil and nation, etc. And then there's a work on these neo-Nazis in Germany who is on YouTube. Still, it was on TikTok. It was on YouTube, trying to promote veganism even as the correct kind of diet for neo-Nazis, and it all goes back to these Nazi Germany's discourse, etc. So, and this is where I want to finish my talk. And I'm sure there are more different ideas. So obviously, I would really love to hear, or rather, if we can discuss what else can we do, how we can bring this forward in our research. That'd be fantastic. Okay, stop sharing now.
Thank you, Atsuko. We do have a question in the chat by Suji. They say, hi there. Hi. There is also change, I think, always relating to the climate change in growing seasons, sunny hours, etc. So, for example, risotto rice might be the past soon. What would that do with Italian national identity?
Okay, that's for you, Marco.
Well, if it's for me, I would say, well, I'm not so much nationalist. I'm sure there will be other countries that will produce arborio or cannaroli rice, which are the one they usually use in Italy. So if it's not Italy, someone else will produce. And as an Italian, we will still keep and cooking our own risotto. So for me, that is fine. But I do appreciate,
Okay.
obviously, the issue in
Yeah.
relation to climate change. I think Michael was typing. Atsuko, thanks for the talk. I have to leave shortly. A quick question about food and enjoyment. There has been some
Yeah,
interesting
yeah,
work on the link
yeah,
between
yeah.
food, identity, and celebrations, for instance,
Mm,
Thanksgiving. And I wonder if you had any thoughts on that. Also, what about the links between food and memory?
yeah.
À la Proust and his Petite
Mm.
Madeleine. Yeah, I'm not sure whether you have
Okay.
any. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Just to go back to this climate change thing, it is already an issue in terms of terroir, the wine production, etc., etc. So, obviously, wine and French identity or whatever, the idea of coming from the soil, there is something going on. So I'm not sure don't know about risotto rice. But enjoyment, I think it's very much to do with probably with group formation or group, um, yeah, maintenance of group, etc., etc. I don't think it becomes more anthropological work, and probably I it hasn't been presented as kind of nationalism or national identity studies. That's why I haven't really kind of um, caught it or
Yeah.
sensed it. Memory, yes, of course. Heritization is definitely about how you deal with memory. Do you kind of institutionalize how you memorize or how you remember about this particular food item? Or is it, is this the intangible cultural heritage? Does it kind of contribute to impose certain kind of homogenizing scheme to this is how you remember about food kind of thing. So yes, memory, etc., definitely relates to the heritage. I think towards the with the heritization of culinary food and its relationship with the group.
Yeah. Thank you. There is Tom. Tom, you want to ask the question yourself? If you want to open the camera as well, it's up to you. Tom.
Hi, thank you, Atsuko. That was fascinating. As we said a little bit at the beginning, my area of research is drink, and particularly beer and pubs. Some time ago, 10, 15 years ago, I was doing research with the Campaign for Real Ale, a consumer group in the UK. And a lot of people I interviewed were saying, if the French had this beautifully crafted, very unique kind of drink with all this heritage and value and authenticity, the French would protect it, the Spanish would protect it, the Italians would protect it. So my question is, and there is a campaign this year, a petition, I'll put a link into the chat, to get cask ale, real ale listed as a cultural heritage
Right, yeah.
recognition. But for a long time, there was a sense in the interviews I did that people didn't care, that there wasn't any national pride, that, particularly the British middle
Mm,
class would
yeah,
rush to consume champagne and rush to
yeah,
consume other nations' esteemed cultural products, food and drink particularly. So I wonder if there's something here, a lot of the examples you used about people wanting to extol the virtues or protect a certain food.
mm,
I'm wondering if there's something there. Has anyone worked on, or is there scope to work on neglect, and a
yeah,
sense of
mm,
dissatisfaction that things are dying out, and youngsters don't want to eat this
yeah,
food or
yeah,
drink this
yeah,
thing,
sure.
that all the trends are against it and something's fading away. I'm sorry, I'm researching the closure of pubs at the moment, so I'm very much focusing on
Mm,
how things end and
yeah,
disappear,
yeah,
and
mm,
not necessarily ending a good news story, the celebration, but things coming to an end and being lost is also very powerful. And I
mm,
think is the mood at the moment in a lot of areas where people feel things are going and disappearing. It's not always a positive story of recognition.
Exactly. Thank you. That's a fascinating point. And Jason, I think there was somebody in Birkbeck who is also doing something about beer. So maybe Jason can help us with this. But anyway, few points. First, I was, when you are discussing the real ale business, I was reminded of whiskey, Scotch whiskey, how it's mobilized. It's very much, industry body driven issue. So in terms of real ale, my hunch is that the industry body has not been successful in tapping into whatever middle class interest or consumer interest, etc. Secondly, in the work on what is disappearing, Ronald and I did another book on the emergence of national food a few years ago. And one of the case studies was how Palestinian cuisine is being forgotten by Palestinian Israeli citizens, women especially. All these middle class Israeli citizens of Palestinian origin, they're too busy to engage and try to promote, maintain the Palestinian culinary heritage. But they want to get on with society. So there is definitely work. And I think if you, in your case, you're looking at the real L, but, all these minorities, whatever minorities, which probably feel they have nothing, the only way is to assimilate. Probably in these cases, disappearance is going on. And again, some people, there are some works on this, I suppose.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Atsuko, there is a comment in the comment question from Claudia in the chat. So basically there are 2 points. One is related to the cost of life crisis. People don't have enough money, and so the classic Sunday roast might disappear. So what's your take on that? And also on the generation side, because what maybe young people eat is not what people used to eat, and so how these both dimension impact national eating traditions.
Right. Okay. Yeah, cost of living issue. I don't think, to be honest, Claudia, I haven't come across much work on this issue yet. Probably the cost of living crisis is more to do with food poverty, the poverty itself. So Ronald, again, my course probably has better idea about it. Yes, in the generational issues, again, it's the combination of these two, I suppose. If the community or groups feels that they have to somehow, they want to continue something, and then it is linked with either political forces or commercial forces. Maybe the Sunday roast is maybe too big to fall, possibly because it's so commercialized as such. So that might be my hunch at the moment.
Thank you. I see there is another comment from Shuji, but I see Jason. Sorry, Jason, I forgot that you were. Jason, do you want to go ahead and if you want, open the camera and comment or ask a question? Thank you, Jason.
Hi, hello everyone. Hi, Atsuko. That was really interesting. Thank you. And I mean, briefly on beer, drink. I mean, I think kind of about what Tom was saying. I think that's, you know, that's right. It does seem to be that certain things get neglected. Like I'm thinking particularly real ale, but bitter specifically, because actually there has been an explosion of interest in you know, sort of craft beers over the last decade or so, and people are still drinking a lot of beer, but they're not drinking that sort of traditional British bitter as much as they used to. And of course, a lot of the breweries have kind of turned to meet that demand. So I think you're right to say that it's commercially led, and it's about the strengths or weaknesses of the organizations who try to promote these things, food or drink. You can't, you know, and of course, as you know, there are protections for things like Melton Mowbray pies and Stilton and that kind of thing. So it does exist. My question to you was going to be a bit more of an abstract one, as you would expect from me, Atsuko. I mean, do you think that? I mean, the problem. I mean, I agree with what you say about how there's not much conceptual reflection going on when we use ideas like gastro-diplomacy or gastro-nationalism. I wonder if that's the problem with nationalism rather than the problem with the way that food studies approaches it, because, you know, food was central to nation building in the 19th and the 20th centuries, and it just isn't in the way that it was before because of, well, what do you want to call it? You know, hyper-capitalism, whatever you might call it. And I think that's the issue about there being, you know, while there's no great clarity on something like gastro-nationalism, is because the problem is the way that food is used in relation to nationalist politics today is quite different from the way that it was in the sort of classical era of nationalism.
I think you have a point there. Yeah. I think I know what you mean. That probably gastro-nationalism and the gastro-diplomacy are interesting, but it cannot be further developed because it's just speaking to a particular historical phase, that, as you said, that it's kind of mass consumption, hyper-capitalist, globalizing market society. It makes sense to me. And so maybe then what we need to look at is how capitalism works, or how capitalism. So we go back. Yeah, I was making a similar point the other day that I've been doing nationalism, but nationalism seems to be, as you say, weaker or thing-centered, or with a things center thing that maybe it's that's maybe the way. If you're interested in theoretical aspect, that's probably we need to look into. Thank you. That kind of makes sense to me. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. Related to capitalism, because there is a comment by Tom that now left the chat, that basically is related possibly to that, because he's asking who is to blame for the loss of the pubs, and he's actually mentioning the big corporate brewers that might be responsible. So there is an interesting avenue of research. And then there is also a question by, again, Suji, that basically is asking, how would you argue for the significance of your research? So studying the connection between food and nationalism. How can you justify to get grants in terms of money grants? Why does it matter? And if I may connect my question to this point, because it's somehow related. So if I have to push a bit further, because obviously we can study nations and nationalism from a variety of perspectives. I mean, you can look, for instance, sport would be maybe the one that would come first to my mind, because they have similar dynamics of sense of pride, but it can be music. So there are a lot of dimensions. So what looking at food bring into the picture that other dimensions don't? So what is the added value of bringing food into the picture in order to explore issues of nations and nationalism? From the way you see this, what is it that other dimensions might not capture?
Okay. We looked at Ronald and I looked at this question, and we think it's because I think our answer to this question is it makes the study of politics relevant. You may be not you in this room, but people might believe that they are 100% apolitical, but because everyone has to consume food. Obviously, there are lots of constraints, etc., etc. But when you are making decisions about consuming food or not consuming food, there are some values, attitude, etc., coming, and that definitely is the linkage to the study of politics. And I think food and nationalism ultimately makes this, yes, politics as a relevant subject to everyone.
Yeah, no, I do see the point. And then if I have to push you again further, because I do take your point about food and politics, but it seems to me that, and again, it might be a misreading, and obviously I haven't read the studies that you mentioned, but it seems there is a risk that by looking at food, there is a risk of essentializing the link between one people, one territory, and then their own food. And this prevents the complexity of nations in the present era, which are much more demographically diverse from a variety of perspectives, religious, culture, language, etc. And so by pinning down, exactly as I mentioned at the beginning, the Italian culinary traditions, practices, etc., listed as a UNESCO immaterial thing. But what about the complexity of nations that have so much additional food? And so I think there is an implicit risk there. By looking at food, we essentialize and we reproduce a sense of homogeneous monocultural nations rather than, plural and complex nations. Do you see the point? Do you see the risk?
That's the idea of gastro-nationalism, gastro-diplomacy, the intangible cultural heritage list, or geographical identification too. That nationalism, the idea of gastro-nationalism, the state uses, according to the sources, state mobilizes certain food to protect their symbolic national identity boundaries.
Yeah.
Now, the state is obviously trying to homogenize, etc. So I know what you mean, but what I think we are doing is to highlight that this is what's happening. The homogenization is happening.
Exactly.
The commercial Scotch whiskey is very, successful because the industry body has been highly effective, but that has, eliminated all sorts of things. Linked to particular image of Scotland, which it's problematic as well. You can, what you can do is to highlight this is what's happening, and then like the work by on these disappearing Palestinian cuisine, you can also pick up what is if these strong forces are not behind it, state, political, or whatever forces or commercial entities, this is what happens. So how we, if we want to mobilize, how we mobilize to protect these diversity, etc.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it makes sense. So it's 5 o'clock. I should say again, thank you very much, Atsuko, for your presentation. Thank you, everyone that was in the chat. It was the last seminar for the 2025. So let me wish everyone a nice Christmas break that is coming up. And then I will see, hopefully, some of you again for our next seminar series for 2026. Thank you again. Have you a great time. It's almost food time. It's almost dinner time for some of us. So let's enjoy. Let's celebrate. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.